Okay, today's lesson is on the Mexican Federal Constitution of 1824. After overthrowing the president, the Mexicans created a new constitution. Like the U.S. Constitution, the Mexican Constitution gave limited power to the central government and gave broad powers to the local governments. This division of power between the central governments and local government is called federalism. The Constitution of 1824 also divided power amongst the three branches of government, just like the U.S. Constitution. A president served as the head of Mexico, but the people of Mexico don't elect the president. Instead, the president is elected by the lawmakers, or the members of Congress. The Constitution does not provide for a separation of church and state, nor did it provide freedom of religion. That's because they had an official religion, which is the Roman Catholic religion, and that made it to be an exact part of the government. So there's no separation of church and state. That is actually a part of their government. The Constitution of 1824 also made Texas a part of the state of Coahuila y Tejas. We'll talk more about that in the next lesson. But the state capital of Coahuila y Tejas is Saltillo, and that's really far away from the Texas colony. Very few Texans were able to participate in government because it was very far to travel from their lands to Saltillo, so their concerns are never heard by the Mexican government. They had very little representation. To even vote, you had to go to Saltillo to place your vote, so very few votes were even made. So let's look in depth at the differences between the Constitution. How is the Mexican Federal Constitution of 1824 similar to the U.S. Constitution? Well, first of all, it's a Republican-style government where representatives are elected to represent the people. There's also an elected president and Congress. Now, even though the president is elected, it's not elected by the people, but they're still elected. There's federalism in place, which is the splitting of power between the central government and the state government. And there's also a separation of powers between the three branches of government. Now, how is it different from the U.S. Constitution? Mexico's lawmakers are the ones that elect the president. There's no freedom of religion, no separation of church and state, and the official religion is the Roman Catholic religion. There's no freedom of religion, so that is integrated into their constitution. Texans had a couple of problems with the Constitution. First of all, Texas is too far away from the capital city of Saltillo, so they had little say in the government. And within the legislature, there's only one representative from Texas, so they had very little say in the government itself. What kind of impact did it have on the settlers? Overall, the settlers are actually happy with this Constitution. It's close enough and familiar enough to the U.S. Constitution that Americans that came into Texas were okay with it. Yeah, they didn't like that they didn't have freedom of religion. That was a problem. But many of the people who said that they would become Roman Catholic portrayed themselves to be Roman Catholic, yet they practiced their own religion within their home. Santa Anna rises to power during this time period, and he, in the end, repeals this constitution, which sets a lot of colonists into a tailspin of anger, which is going to cause us to move into a time period where revolution is going to be the outcome. Here you see a Venn diagram that compares the two constitutions to each other. You need to know the differences here, especially that both of these constitutions were federal constitutions. A big difference: the Mexican Constitution of 1824 has no Bill of Rights, whereas the U.S. Constitution does have a Bill of Rights. You also have the difference between separation of church and state and separation of church and state for the U.S. And the president's vote is by the elected lawmakers, whereas in the U.S. the citizens vote for the president. Now, one thing you're going to hear a lot along with federalism is the word federalist, which is a sharing of powers between the central government and the state government. If you agree that the state should have some powers as well as the central government, then you're a federalist. A centralist wants all of the power at the central government. They do not want states to be able to choose for themselves what works for them. Now, the issue that colonists eventually have with Santa Anna is when he rises to power. He rises to power as a federalist. In fact, the Texans like him because he's a federalist. They vote for him, those that do vote. They vote for him because he's a federalist. And that means that in the state of Coahuila y Tejas, they'd be able to decide what worked for their state, for them. It didn't matter for the rest of Mexico. And seeing as to Texas looked so much different than the rest of Mexico, that was a really big thing for them. But Santa Anna moves quickly away from being a federalist after he becomes president to becoming a centralist because he wants to rein in that power. He wants the power. But after he finds that he is having problems with lawmakers passing laws that are not in his favor, he quickly moves into becoming a dictator because he rises through power through the military. And with that military backing, he is able to take over all of Mexico. So don't forget, this is the Mexican Federal Constitution of 1824. This is going to play a key role when we get to talking about the start of the revolution, because this is going to be one of those key factors that Texans are going to cite as the reason for starting the rebellions that they start all across our state.